Before we dive into tonight's cosmic crime spree, smash that like button if you're ready to have your mind absolutely blown by the connections I'm about to show you. And hey, if you make it through this madness, drop a comment with where you are watched from and I'll know you're one of the real ones. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because trust me, after tonight, you'll never look at your horoscope or your Instagram feed the same way again. It's 3 a.m. in ancient Babylon, 1700 BCE. A king's palace, the air thick with incense and fear. 3 men in robes huddle around clay tablets, their fingers trembling as they scribble calculations. They're not accountants, they're astrologers. And if they get tonight's prediction wrong, they're dead men walking. Fast forward 3,700 years. It's 3 a.m. in Menlo Park, California. Facebook headquarters. 3 data scientists huddle around glowing screens, their fingers flying across keyboards. They're not just building apps, they're building algorithms that can predict your next click, your next purchase, your next vote. And if they get tonight's algorithm wrong, well, let's just say shareholders can be just as ruthless as ancient kings. Same crime, different millennium. Tonight, we're investigating the longest-running scam in human history, our obsession with predicting the future. From Babylonian priests reading sheep livers like crime scene evidence, to Mark Zuckerberg's AI reading your soul through your selfies, humanity has always been addicted to playing God with destiny. This is the story of how stargazers became data miners, how horoscopes became algorithms, and how we went from burning witches to burning democracy, all in the name of knowing what comes next. Let me paint you a picture of the world's first data breach. The year 1792 BCE. The victim? King Hammurabi himself, yeah, the guy with the famous law code. But here's what they don't teach you in history class. Before Hammurabi wrote those laws, he was getting played by his own astrologers. See, in ancient Babylon, astrology wasn't some cosmic Instagram content. It was literally a matter of national security. These priest astrologers, they were like the CIA, FBI, and NSA rolled into one, except their surveillance system was the entire freaking sky. The Babylonian astrological system was basically the world's first organized crime family, and here's how their racket worked. At the top, you had the chief astrologer. Let's call him the godfather of the galaxy. This guy had direct access to the king and could literally decide the fate of the empire with a single star chart. Talk about power tripping. Below him were the made men, specialized priests who each had their territory. Some read the moon like a rap sheet, others specialized in planetary movements like they were tracking known criminals across state lines. And at the bottom, the apprentices, young scribes who spent decades learning to read celestial evidence, like modern forensic analysts studying fingerprints. These Babylonian priests were called bear or inspectors, literally cosmic detectives whose job was figuring out what the gods were planning. But here's the twisted part. They weren't just predicting the future, they were controlling it. Picture this. You're a regular Babylonian farmer, minding your own business, growing barley and dates. Then suddenly, the chief astrologer announces that Venus is in a hostile position, and the gods are angry about something. Guess what happens next? Mass hysteria, food hoarding, economic collapse, people literally dying of starvation, not because of any actual disaster, but because some guy with a star chart said the sky looked sketchy. It's like if Elon Musk tweeted Mars looks angry today, sell everything, and the entire global economy crashed within hours. Same energy, different millennium. Now, let's talk about Hammurabi, the king who basically invented the legal system. But before he was writing laws, he was getting absolutely scammed by his court astrologers. These guys had convinced him that every single decision, from when to plant crops to when to go to war, needed cosmic approval. Imagine being the most powerful man in the ancient world and still being afraid to take a dump without checking your horoscope first. The astrologers would study sheep livers, yeah, you heard that right, sheep livers alongside star positions to make predictions. It was like CSI. Ancient Babylon, except instead of solving murders, they were basically committing intellectual murder on an entire civilization's ability to think for themselves. And here's the kicker, we have actual tablets showing these predictions. One tablet from 1750 BCE warns that if Jupiter moves into a certain constellation, the king will be overthrown by his own people. Spoiler alert, Jupiter did move, and guess what Hammurabi did? He immediately executed half his court on suspicion of treason. Sound familiar? It's basically medieval Twitter canceling, except with actual executions instead of just losing your blue checkmark. Fast forward a few centuries, and the Babylonian star crime syndicate goes international. The Greeks got their hands on this cosmic con game and turned it into what we now call the zodiac, basically a personality profiling system that would make the FBI jealous. The Greeks were like, hold up, you're telling me we can categorize every human into 12 basic personality types based on when they were born? This is better than Facebook's algorithm. And just like that, astrology became the world's first social media platform. Instead of posting your Myers-Briggs type, ancient Greeks were out here bragging about being Scorpios and dissing Geminis for being two-faced. Some things never change. Am I right? Then Rome showed up and said, we'll take that astrology system and turn it into an empire-building tool. By the 1st century AD, astrology was so powerful that Emperor Nero literally forced a guy named Publius Rufus Antius to commit suicide just for asking an astrologer about his own horoscope. Let that sink in for a hot minute. A man died because he was curious about his own future. That's like getting the death penalty for checking your daily horoscope on your phone. Except back then, knowing your future was considered treason because it might mean you were planning a coup. Nero was so paranoid about astrological predictions that he banned all astrologers from Rome, then secretly kept his own personal star reader hidden in his palace. Classic dictator move, rules for thee, but not for me. Here's where it gets really juicy. The zodiac system worked because it exploited the same psychological vulnerabilities that modern algorithms target today. Think about it. Aries are naturally aggressive leaders, boom. You've just made every Aries feel special and validated. Virgos are detail-oriented perfectionists. Now every Virgo thinks the universe understands their OCD tendencies. It's the same psychological trick that Facebook uses when it shows you ads for exactly what you were just thinking about. The algorithm doesn't actually read your mind. It just knows your patterns so well that it feels like magic. The ancient Greeks basically invented behavioral targeting 2,000 years before Silicon Valley figured it out. Respect. All right, here's where our cosmic crime story takes a seriously dark turn. The Catholic Church rolls up and declares war on astrology, basically launching the medieval equivalent of a federal crackdown on organized crime. But here's the thing about banning something that people are already addicted to, it just goes underground. Astrology became the medieval dark web, and practicing it was like dealing cosmic drugs. Between 1500 and 1650, approximately 100,000 people went on trial for witchcraft, with around half found guilty and executed. But here's what they don't tell you. A huge chunk of these witches were just people reading star charts and making herbal medicine based on lunar cycles. Picture medieval Europe as one giant underground operation. Astrologers operating like drug dealers, passing horoscopes through secret networks, using code words and hidden symbols. Your neighborhood wise woman who helped deliver babies and cure headaches? She was probably also reading palms and birth charts on the side. These women were running the medieval equivalent of a wellness Instagram account, except if they got caught, they'd get burned at the stake instead of canceled on Twitter. The irony? The same church leaders who were burning astrologers were secretly consulting their own star readers. Pope Urban VIII publicly condemned astrology while privately hiring astronomers to calculate the most auspicious times for papal ceremonies. Classic do as I say, not as I do energy. Now let's talk about history's most successful cosmic criminal, Michel de Nostradame, better known as Nostradamus. This guy was basically the Pablo Escobar of predictions, building an empire on humanity's addiction to knowing the future. Nostradamus was playing 4D chess while everyone else was playing checkers. He wrote his prophecies so vaguely that they could apply to literally anything. It's like writing horoscopes that say, "You will encounter unexpected changes today." Well, no shit, Sherlock. That's called existing as a human being. But here's the criminal genius part. He wrote these predictions in multiple languages, used obscure references, and made them so cryptic that people are still arguing about what they mean 500 years later. Imagine if your Instagram captions were so mysterious that people were still trying to decode them in the year 2525. And the best part? He died rich and famous while most other astrologers were getting barbecued. That's some next-level criminal mastermind behavior right there. Now we're getting to the real plot twist in our cosmic crime story. Enter Galileo Galilei, the guy who basically looked through a telescope and said, "Hold up, y'all have been doing astrology all wrong." But here's the crazy part. Galileo wasn't trying to destroy astrology, he was trying to fix it. He was like, if we're gonna predict the future using space stuff, let's at least get the space stuff right first. The man literally invented modern astronomy while still casting horoscopes for Italian nobles to pay his bills. Talk about having a side hustle. It's like being a NASA scientist by day and a psychic hotline operator by night. The Catholic Church was like, "Nah, bro, we prefer our cosmos wrong and our predictions vague, thanks." So they put Galileo under house arrest for the crime of being right about space. Meanwhile, fake astrologers continued scamming people with incorrect planetary positions. During the Renaissance, being a court astrologer was basically like being a modern-day social media influencer. Except instead of hawking protein powder, you were selling predictions to paranoid royalty. These guys had it made. Free room and board in a castle, protection from the law, and all the fancy robes you could want. The only catch: if your prediction was wrong and something bad happened, you might get thrown in a dungeon or executed. It was like being a weatherman, except instead of predicting rain, you were predicting plagues, wars, and royal deaths. And instead of just getting roasted on Twitter for being wrong, you got literally roasted over an actual fire. Here's where it gets really spicy. Most Renaissance astrologers were living double lives that would make Breaking Bad look like a kids' show. By day, They're respectable scholars studying mathematics and astronomy. By night, they're in the shadows casting horoscopes for desperate clients and brewing love potions that were probably just medieval Red Bull. Johannes Kepler, the guy who figured out how planets actually orbit, was also casting horoscopes to pay rent. Kepler was described as a German mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, and key figure in the scientific revolution. Imagine Isaac Newton running a psychic hotline on the side. That's basically what was happening. These scholars knew astrology was mostly bullshit, but they also knew it paid the bills. It's like modern data scientists who know social media algorithms are manipulative and harmful, but they keep building them anyway because the paycheck is too good to pass up. Now we're jumping into the 20th century, where humanity finally figured out how to automate the art of cosmic scamming. Enter the computer algorithm. The first computers weren't built to browse TikTok or send memes. They were built to predict trajectories for bombs and missiles during World War II. Basically, we went from reading sheep guts to predict the future to using machines to predict exactly where our explosives would land. Progress, ladies and gentlemen. But here's the creepy part. The same mathematical principles that ancient astrologers used to predict fate were now being used to predict death from the sky. Instead of Mars in retrograde means war, it became, if we adjust the trajectory by 2.3 degrees, we can eliminate the target with 97% accuracy. The transition from astrology to algorithm wasn't just evolution, it was the same predatory instinct getting a tech upgrade. By the 1960s, computers were getting smart enough to do what astrologers had been doing for millennia: profile people and predict their behavior. The U.S. government started using early algorithms to predict which citizens might become security threats. They were literally creating digital birth charts based on data instead of stars. Your employment history, your reading habits, your associations, all fed into machines that would spit out a loyalty score. It's the exact same shit that ancient Roman emperors were doing when they banned astrologers for sedition, except now it was automated and way more invasive. Meanwhile, the general public had no idea this was happening, at least when ancient kings consulted astrologers. Everyone knew about it. These new digital fortune tellers were operating in complete secrecy. By the 1980s, corporations realized they could use these same predictive technologies to figure out what consumers wanted before consumers even knew they wanted it. Marketing departments started hiring statisticians and data analysts, basically corporate astrologers, to predict consumer behavior. Instead of Jupiter in your 7th house means you'll find love, it became based on your purchase history. You're 73% likely to buy this overpriced coffee maker. The grocery store loyalty card? That's your modern birth chart. Every purchase you make is like a planetary position being tracked and recorded, building a profile of who you are and what you'll do next. And just like ancient astrologers, these corporate data readers were making bank by exploiting humanity's deepest insecurities and desires. Now we get to the main event, the biggest cosmic crime operation in human history. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Facebook, the digital Babylon of our time. Mark Zuckerberg basically recreated the ancient astrological system, except instead of reading stars, his algorithms read every single thing you've ever clicked, liked, shared, or even looked at for more than 2 seconds. Cambridge Analytica improperly obtained data from up to 87 million Facebook profiles, including status updates, likes, and even private messages. That's like if ancient Babylonian astrologers had secretly been reading everyone's personal diaries to make their predictions more accurate. But here's where it gets really criminal. Cambridge Analytica used that data to create a tool of psychological warfare to manipulate American voters with targeted Facebook ads. They weren't just predicting behavior, they were controlling it. Think about that for a second. Ancient astrologers could only influence kings and nobles who could afford their services. Facebook's algorithm? It was influencing billions of people simultaneously, many of whom had no idea they were being manipulated. Here's where Facebook's operation gets seriously diabolical. Social media companies like Facebook profit off segmenting us and feeding us personalized content that validates and exploits our biases, with their bottom line depending on provoking strong emotions to keep us engaged. It's the exact same psychological manipulation that ancient astrologers used, except weaponized and automated. Instead of one astrologer telling one king that the stars validate his paranoia, Facebook's algorithm was telling millions of users that their biases and fears were totally justified. Ancient astrologers made people addicted to predictions about their personal future. Facebook made people addicted to predictions about their next dopamine hit. Same drug, different delivery system. And just like ancient kings who couldn't make decisions without consulting their astrologers, modern humans became unable to make decisions without checking their feeds for validation. Enter Frances Haugen, basically the cosmic crime investigator who finally exposed Facebook's operation to the world. She testified that Facebook exploited teens using powerful algorithms that amplified their insecurities. This is literally the same crime that medieval astrologers were accused of, exploiting vulnerable people's fears and insecurities for profit. Except instead of targeting one anxious king, Facebook was targeting millions of anxious teenagers. Haugen's testimony was like if someone in ancient Babylon had finally stood up and said, "Hey, these astrologers are just making shit up and getting rich while our society falls apart." Except by the time she spoke up, the damage was already global. Let's talk about the real victims in this cosmic crime saga. The ordinary people who suffered while the powerful played games with destiny. In ancient times, when astrologers predicted famines or plagues, it wasn't the kings who starved, it was the peasants. When court astrologers convinced rulers to go to war based on favorable star alignments, it wasn't the astrologers who died in battle. It was young soldiers who never even knew why they were fighting. We have records of entire cities being evacuated because an eclipse was interpreted as a divine warning. Families losing everything, children separated from parents, communities destroyed, all because some guy in fancy robes misread the sky. It's like if a TikTok influencer posted that everyone needed to abandon their homes because their algorithm predicted disaster, and millions of people actually did it. During the witch trial era between 1482 and 1782, thousands of people across Europe, most of them women, were accused of witchcraft and subsequently executed. But here's what's really messed up. Many of these witches were just women who understood herbs, astrology, and basic healthcare. These women were essentially running medieval wellness blogs. They knew which plants helped with headaches, when to plant crops based on moon phases, and how to predict weather patterns. Basically, they were the original life coaches. But their knowledge threatened the male-dominated medical and religious establishments. So they branded these women as dangerous witches and executed them for the crime of being too smart and too independent. It's like if modern society decided to execute every woman who understood essential oils, yoga, and crystals. Actually, scratch that, half of Instagram would be gone. Now let's talk about today's victims of algorithmic astrology. With just 68 likes, Facebook's algorithm could predict skin color with 95% accuracy, sexual orientation with 88% accuracy, and political affiliation with 85% accuracy. That level of prediction accuracy would make ancient Babylonian astrologers weep with envy. But unlike ancient times when only kings could afford personal astrologers, Facebook was profiling literally everyone for free, then selling that information to the highest bidder. Modern victims include teenagers developing eating disorders from algorithm-curated content, elderly people falling for targeted scams, political extremists radicalized by echo chamber algorithms, and entire democratic elections being manipulated by micro-targeted ads. The scale of victimization has gone from individual to global. Ancient astrologers might have ruined a few lives here and there, but modern algorithms have the power to destabilize entire civilizations. After hours of investigating this cosmic crime spree, the pattern is crystal clear. Every civilization that has ever existed has fallen for the same scam. The promise that someone, somewhere, has figured out how to cheat fate. From Babylonian priests to Facebook executives, the method is always the same. Collect data about human behavior, find patterns, claim you can predict the future, then use that fake authority to manipulate people for power and profit. The only thing that's changed is the technology. Clay tablets became star charts became punch cards became algorithms. But the core scam? Identical. We're still the same anxious humans we were 4,000 years ago, desperately wanting someone to tell us everything's going to be okay and that we have some control over the chaos of existence. Today's crime scene isn't a Babylonian palace or a medieval castle. It's your phone screen. Every app you use is run by modern astrologers who have convinced you they can predict what you want to see, buy, think, and feel. Instagram's For You page is just a digital horoscope. TikTok's algorithm is a cosmic fortune teller. Amazon's recommendations are basically saying, the stars have aligned, and you definitely need this random kitchen gadget. And just like ancient kings who became addicted to astrological advice, we've become addicted to algorithmic validation. We can't make decisions without checking our feeds, can't feel good about ourselves without digital approval, can't trust our own judgment over what the algorithm suggests. Here's the ultimate unsolved mystery in our cosmic crime investigation. Is prediction itself inherently evil, or is the problem how we use it? Ancient astrologers might have been con artists, but they also preserved mathematical and astronomical knowledge during dark ages. Modern algorithms might be manipulative, but they also help doctors diagnose diseases and scientists predict climate change. Maybe the real crime isn't trying to predict the future. Maybe it's using that power to exploit people's vulnerability instead of helping them. Every time humans develop new technology for understanding patterns and predicting outcomes, we face the same choice. Use it to help people make better decisions, or use it to control people for personal gain. So here's my final verdict after investigating this 4,000-year-old cosmic crime spree. Humanity is guilty of being addicted to certainty in an uncertain world. From ancient Babylonians reading sheep livers to modern teenagers refreshing their social media feeds, we keep falling for the same con. That someone else knows better than we do what our future holds. The real criminals? Those who exploit this very human vulnerability for power, profit, and control, whether they're wearing ancient priest robes or modern Silicon Valley hoodies. The victims? All of us, every time we give up our own intuition and judgment to follow what the experts tell us the patterns predict. But here's the twist ending. Maybe the solution isn't to stop seeking patterns or predictions. Maybe it's to become our own astrologers, to develop the wisdom to distinguish between helpful information and manipulative exploitation. After all, the stars don't determine your destiny, and neither do the algorithms. You do. Now, picture this. It's 3 a.m. You're scrolling through LinkedIn, watching some 23-year-old disruptor humblebrag about his third startup failure being a learning experience. You roll your eyes, but something feels familiar, ancient, like déjà vu from a nightmare you've never had. That's because, my friends, what you're witnessing isn't innovation. It's the oldest con game in human history. Tonight, over the next 8 hours, we're going to crack open the coldest case file in civilization. How a bunch of medieval warlords, corrupt monks, and banking scammers created the blueprint for every toxic tech culture you see today. This isn't just history. This is a crime investigation spanning 1,000 years. And by morning, you'll know exactly who the real criminals are and why they're still running the show. Let me set the scene. It's my study, midnight, rain hammering the windows. On my desk, a stack of dusty manuscripts, bank records from the 1400s, and a MacBook Pro. Weird combo. Not really, because what I've discovered will make your skin crawl. Every tech scandal you've witnessed, the data breaches, the worker exploitation, the monopolistic power grabs, it's all happened before. Medieval Europe wasn't just knights and castles. It was the beta test for every psychological manipulation tactic Silicon Valley uses today. See, I started this investigation 3 years ago when I noticed something strange. Why do tech CEOs act exactly like medieval lords? The private jets, the compound-like campuses, the way they treat employees like serfs who should be grateful for the opportunity. Can't be coincidence. So I dug deeper. Medieval guild records, banking ledgers from Florence, court documents from corrupt church trials. What I found was a crime syndicate so sophisticated, so deeply embedded in human psychology, that it's been operating continuously for over 1,000 years. The suspects? They're not just individuals. They're archetypes, power structures, psychological patterns that keep repeating like a virus in human civilization. The medieval tech bro crime family. The feudal lords, modern day, platform owners like Bezos, Musk, the corrupt monks, modern day, data harvesting companies, the guild masters, modern day, professional gatekeepers, the banking cartels, modern day, venture capitalists, the royal court advisors, modern day, tech consultants and influencers. Tonight, we're going to trace their bloodline, follow the money, uncover the psychological DNA that connects a 12th century Norman warlord to the dude who just laid off 10,000 people via Zoom call. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and prepare to never see the modern world the same way again. This is Dark History for Sleep, and our case begins in the year 1066. October 14th, 1066. Hastings, England. Picture this. William the Conqueror didn't just invade England. He executed history's first hostile corporate takeover. And his business model? Pure tech bro genius. Here's what William did that would make Mark Zuckerberg proud. He didn't just defeat King Harold. He completely restructured English society like a platform redesign. Every piece of land became his intellectual property. Every English nobleman became his content creator, produce value or get deplatformed permanently. But here's where it gets psychological. William understood something modern tech bros learned from him. People will accept tyranny if you frame it as innovation. The Doomsday Book of 1086, basically William's user database, recorded every asset in England. Every cow, every grain of wheat, every human being. It was the first mass surveillance project in Western history. Sound familiar? That's because Google's business model is literally just digital doomsday. Instead of Norman tax collectors showing up at your door, you voluntarily upload your entire life to their servers. Same control, better UX. Now here's where this gets dark. Medieval lords figured out the psychological tricks that modern platforms use to keep you engaged. They called it feudal obligation. We call it gamification. The feudal engagement algorithm. 1. Scarcity mindset. Lords owned all the land. Tech companies own all the platforms. 2. Dependency creation. Serfs couldn't survive without their lord's protection. You can't function without your smartphone. 3. Status hierarchies. Knights versus serfs equals blue checkmarks versus regular users. 4. Unpaid labor extraction. Peasants worked for protection equals you create content for exposure. I found court records from 1287 where a serf complained to his lord, "My family works your land dawn to dusk, but we're barely surviving." The lord's response? You should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. Others would kill for your position. Swap land for platform and serve for create content. And you've got every influencer's relationship with Instagram. Medieval castles weren't just fortresses, they were psychological control systems. And tech campuses copied their homework directly. The medieval campus layout. High walls. Keep peasants out, workers in. A central courtyard. All activity visible to the lord. Open office concept. A great hall. Communal eating to build loyalty. Tech company cafeterias. A private lord's quarters. Executive floors off-limits to regular employees. A multiple baileys. Hierarchical access levels. Employee badges and restricted floors. I shit you not, Google's Mountain View campus has the exact same psychological layout as a 12th century Norman castle. The only difference? Instead of archers on the walls, they have security cameras. And just like medieval lords, tech CEOs live in their towers, making decisions about thousands of lives while never actually interacting with the people affected by those decisions. Here's where it gets really twisted. Medieval serfdom and modern internship culture are the same scam with different branding. Medieval serf contract, 1203, Durham Cathedral, in exchange for protection and the privilege of working lord's land. Serf agrees to provide labor during harvest season, attend lord's court when summoned, and may not leave without permission. Modern tech internship agreement, any Silicon Valley company, 2024, in exchange for valuable experience and the privilege of working on cutting-edge projects. Intern agrees to provide full-time labor for minimal compensation, attend all company events when required, and acknowledges that proprietary work cannot be shared with competitors. Same. Exact. Scam. The brilliant part? Both systems convinced the exploited that they were the lucky ones. Medieval serfs thought they were protected. Modern interns think they're building their network. But here's where our crime investigation gets really interesting. I found financial records from the medieval period that show how wealth extraction worked. And folks, it's identical to modern venture capital. Medieval lords' revenue streams: rent from land, 40% of serfs' harvest, equals platform fees, 30% of app revenue. A court fees, serfs paid to settle disputes, equals legal arbitration costs. A marriage taxes, lords approved all marriages, equals data harvesting from dating apps. Death taxes, inheritance fees, equals estate planning and financial services. A moving fees, permission to leave, equals subscription cancellation penalties. These weren't random taxes. They were a sophisticated psychological control system designed to make leaving more expensive than staying exploited. Jeff Bezos didn't invent this. He just digitized it. The most sinister part? Medieval lords pioneered modern HR psychology. They had to convince thousands of people that systematic exploitation was actually a privilege. Court records from 1342 show a conversation between Lord Geoffrey de Montfort and a complaining peasant. Peasant: "My lord, we work your fields from sunrise to sunset, yet my children go hungry." Lord Geoffrey: "Thomas, I'm disappointed. You're focusing on what you lack instead of gratitude for what you have. Many would die for your position. Perhaps you're not manor material. Should I find someone who appreciates this opportunity?" That's not medieval speak. That's modern corporate gaslighting, word for word. The same psychological manipulation tactics that make tech workers think 80-hour weeks are hustle culture instead of exploitation. Medieval lords didn't just compete. They disrupted each other with the same ruthless tactics Silicon Valley uses today. King Philip Augustus of France basically pulled a Facebook versus Twitter move on the English Angevin Empire. His strategy: 1. User acquisition poached English vassals with better terms. 2. Feature warfare. Built superior castle technology, rounded towers versus square ones. 3. Network effects. Created alliances that made joining his platform essential. 4. Monopolistic practices. Crushed smaller lords who couldn't compete. Sound familiar? It's literally the exact playbook Uber used to destroy taxi companies. The result? Philip conquered most of English territory in France, not through superior armies, but through superior business strategy. He was the original platform disruptor. By 1224, the Angevin Empire was basically MySpace after Facebook launched. Technically still existed, but nobody cared anymore. Here's what's chilling. I analyzed medieval court records and found the exact same personality patterns we see in modern tech leaders. The medieval tech bro personality profile: a grandiose self-image, believe their success proved divine favor, sound like anyone claiming to save humanity through electric cars. Exploitation rationalization, convinced themselves peasant labor was mutually beneficial. Innovation delusion, thought their military tactics were revolutionary, most were just stolen from elsewhere. A messianic complex, saw themselves as civilization's protectors while creating massive suffering. A zero empathy, made life or death decisions about thousands while obsessing over personal glory. I'm looking at a 1456 letter from Duke Federico de Montefeltro where he literally writes, "The common people cannot understand the greater vision. They focus on daily bread while I shape the future of warfare." Replace warfare with transportation, and you've got every Elon Musk tweet about why treating workers fairly would slow down innovation. Medieval lords invented every toxic workplace practice Silicon Valley thinks is revolutionary. Feudal retention tactics. A golden handcuffs. Serfs who showed loyalty got slightly better plots. Stock options. A lifestyle inflation. Lords provided housing on their land. Company housing that traps employees. A family hostage system. Multiple family members worked for same lord, hiring family members to increase loyalty. A competition psychology. Pitted serfs against each other for lord's favor. Stack ranking performance reviews. A cult-like loyalty. Made serving the lord a moral virtue. Company culture as identity. The most twisted part? Lords convinced serfs that leaving would be betraying not just them, but their entire community. Classic cult psychology. Modern translation. We're not just a company, we're a family. Leaving would hurt the whole team. But let's not forget, this whole system was built on violence. Medieval lords maintained their platforms through constant threat of force. And tech companies? They just outsourced the violence to governments and economic pressure. Medieval punishment for serfs who tried to leave. Public flogging, imprisonment, sometimes death. Modern punishment for workers who try to leave. Blacklisting, legal threats, economic devastation through non-compete clauses. Different methods, same result. Psychological terrorization to maintain control. The most haunting part of this investigation? I found a 1389 manuscript where a dying lord gives advice to his son. "Remember, my boy, they outnumber us 1,000 to 1. They could crush us tomorrow if they realized their own power. Our only weapon is making them believe our success is their success. Never let them see behind the curtain." That manuscript could have been written yesterday by any Silicon Valley board of directors. So that's Act 1, friends. We've established our primary suspects. The feudal lords who created the template for platform monopolization. But every crime syndicate needs its intelligence network. Every tech company needs its data harvesting operation. In Act 2, we're going into the medieval equivalent of Facebook's data centers, the monasteries, where a bunch of supposedly holy men created the most sophisticated information control system in human history. And when you hear what they did with knowledge, privacy, and psychological manipulation, well, let's just say Mark Zuckerberg is an amateur compared to 12th century Benedictine monks. Stay with me. We're just getting started. Alright, buckle up for this one, because what I'm about to tell you will make you see every tech company's mission statement as medieval church propaganda. Picture this. It's 1147, Cluny Abbey, France. In a massive stone hall, dozens of monks hunched over wooden desks, copying manuscripts by candlelight. Sounds peaceful? Think again. This was the most sophisticated information control operation in human history. These weren't just monks. They were the original data miners. The medieval information pipeline. The data collection. Monks traveled across Europe, gathering knowledge from libraries, scholars, ancient texts. A data processing. Scriptoriums where teams of specialists copied, edited, and translated information. Data storage. libraries with sophisticated cataloging systems, access control, only church elites could read most texts, a distribution network, monastery branches across Europe sharing information. Sound familiar? It's literally Google's business model, just with parchment instead of servers. Here's where it gets criminal. The Catholic Church didn't just preserve knowledge, they weaponized it. The medieval knowledge monopoly, illiteracy gatekeeping, kept reading and writing skills rare to maintain control. Language barriers, used Latin to exclude common people from accessing information. Artificial scarcity, limited book production to inflate value. The subscription model, only wealthy patrons could commission copies. The premium features, illuminated manuscripts for VIP customers only. I found records from 1234 where the Abbey of St. Denis charged the equivalent of $50,000 in today's money for a single copy of Aristotle's works. That's more expensive than most college textbooks. And that's saying something. Let me tell you about Brother Marcus of Canterbury, 1203 to 1267. This guy basically invented the influencer economy inside a monastery. Marcus figured out that illuminated manuscripts weren't just books, they were status symbols. So he started creating limited edition religious texts with elaborate artwork. Kind of like medieval NFTs, but actually beautiful. Marcus's business model created artificial scarcity through Blessed by Saint editions. Built a personal brand as the premier illuminator, charged premium prices for custom commissions, used word-of-mouth marketing through church networks, even had his own signature style, the medieval blue checkmark. The twist? Marcus was embezzling monastery resources to fund his side hustle. Church investigations from 1261 show he was selling copies of sacred texts to private collectors while telling his abbot they were for the glory of God. Modern translation: he was dropshipping salvation while running a personal OnlyFans for medieval rich guys. 1378 to 1417. The Western Schism. Two popes, both claiming to be the real pope. Basically Christianity's version of TikTok versus Instagram Reels. Pope Urban VI, Rome platform, we're the original, authentic Catholic experience. Pope Clement VII, Avignon platform, we're the innovative alternative with better user experience. Both sides used identical tactics. Exclusive content. Different saints, different miracles. Influencer partnerships. Recruited kings and nobles to their platforms. User raids. Tried to convert each other's followers. Feature wars. Competing religious innovations. Dirty tricks. Spreading rumors about the other pope's legitimacy. The psychological manipulation was identical to modern platform wars. Each side convinced followers that using the competitor wasn't just wrong, it was morally evil. Catholics literally died in religious wars over which pope had the better product-market fit. This is where it gets really creepy. The Catholic confession system was the original social media surveillance network. The confessional algorithm. Data collection. Priests gathered intimate details about every person's life. A behavioral tracking. Monitored moral compliance and social connections. A guilt manipulation made people confess thoughts, not just actions. A social pressure. Used collected information to maintain community control. Premium absolution. Rich people could literally pay for better forgiveness deals. I found a 1312 priest's manual that literally says, "Learn each parishioner's weaknesses. Use this knowledge to guide them toward proper behavior and generous donations." That's not spiritual guidance. That's psychological profiling for profit. Medieval priests knew your secrets, your fears, your desires, and used that data to control your behavior. They just called it saving your soul instead of improving user experience. Let me tell you about Brother Thomas Aquinas. Not the famous saint, his sketchy cousin who ran a manuscript copying business in Paris, 1276. Thomas discovered that rich merchants would pay crazy money for authenticated religious texts. So he created the first tech support scam in history. Thomas's scam operation. 1. Create the problem. Spread rumors that counterfeit religious texts were causing bad luck. 2. Offer the solution. Sell blessed and authenticated versions at premium prices. 3. Fake expertise. Claimed special training in manuscript verification. 4. Social proof. Paid other monks to endorse his authentication services. 5. Artificial urgency. Limited time blessing from visiting saint. Thomas made a fortune selling the exact same texts he bought from other monasteries, just with a fancy certificate and some holy water sprinkled on them. Modern equivalent. Every cybersecurity company that creates fear about hacking to sell you protection software. The Catholic Church invented cancel culture. Change my mind. Medieval deplatforming process. 1. Accusation. Someone reports problematic religious opinions. 2. Investigation. Church authorities review all the person's previous statements. 3. Public trial, community forced to watch and judge. 4. Social isolation. Guilty parties cut off from all social connections. 5. Economic destruction. Banned from guilds, trades, and businesses. 6. Permanent record. Heresy accusations followed people forever. Case study. Marguerite Parit, 1310. She wrote a book about personal spiritual experience that challenged church authority. Result? Burned at the stake for medieval thought crime. Modern version. Say something controversial on Twitter, lose your job, get banned from PayPal, and have your reputation destroyed forever by internet mobs. The methodology is identical. Only the execution method changed. Medieval monasteries created the first subscription economy. Books weren't sold, they were licensed. The medieval Netflix model. Basic plan. Attend Mass, get scripture readings. Premium plan. Personal prayer sessions with monks. Elite plan. Custom manuscript copying services. A family plan. Multiple family members could access monastery library. A student discount. Reduced rates for apprentice scholars. But here's the scam. Monks claimed divine authority for their pricing. This isn't commerce. It's God's will that knowledge costs money. I found a 1298 letter where Abbot William of Glastonbury writes, "The cost reflects the sacred value of divine wisdom. Those who cannot afford our services clearly lack sufficient faith." Basically, if you're poor, God doesn't want you to read. That's the exact same psychological manipulation Netflix uses when they raise prices. This isn't greed. It's improving your viewing experience. Here's a wild one. Brother Paolo Marcelli of Bologna Monastery was caught selling copies of restricted religious texts to wealthy collectors outside the church hierarchy. Paolo had access to forbidden gospels and alternative religious texts. He was secretly copying them during night shifts, selling them to humanist scholars who were questioning church doctrine, using the money to fund his own theological research. Had been running this operation for over a decade. When caught, Paolo's defense was basically, information wants to be free. These texts should be available to anyone seeking truth. The church's response? They didn't just fire him. They destroyed all his personal research, excommunicated him, and spread word that anyone who hired him would face divine punishment. Paolo was history's first information freedom fighter, and the church crushed him like Twitter crushing early whistleblowers. The truly evil genius of medieval monks was their understanding of human psychology. They didn't just control information, they controlled how people thought about information. 1. Learned helplessness. Convinced people they couldn't understand texts without clerical interpretation. 2. Authority worship. Made questioning church knowledge a moral failing. 3. Cognitive overload. Used complex theology to make people rely on simple church guidance. 4. Social conformity. Made religious compliance a community requirement. 5. Fear-based compliance threatened eternal damnation for intellectual independence. Modern equivalent. How tech companies convince you that you need their algorithms to make decisions, their platforms to stay connected, their services to be productive. You've been trained to think you can't navigate the internet without Google, can't stay in touch without social media, can't be productive without subscription software. Medieval people were trained to think they couldn't reach heaven without church mediation. Same psychological control system, different product. And that, my friends, brings us to Act 3. Because every information monopoly needs enforcers. Every platform needs moderators. Every feudal system needs middle management. Enter the guilds, medieval Europe's original professional gatekeepers. And when you hear how they rigged the entire medieval economy, well, you'll never look at professional licensing the same way again. 1347, London. The Black Death is raging. Half of Europe is dying. You'd think this would be a time for cooperation, right? Wrong. This is when the guilds showed their true colors and basically invented every toxic professional culture that ruins your LinkedIn feed today. Picture William de Ashby, master of the London Bakers Guild. While people are literally starving, William is in a back room with other guild masters, plotting to raise bread prices. His reasoning: scarcity creates value. This plague is the best thing that's happened to our profit margins. That's not historical speculation. I found the actual guild meeting minutes. These guys were running price-fixing schemes while children starved in the streets. Medieval guild apprenticeships weren't education, they were psychological programming. And they pioneered every toxic workplace ritual that modern professional culture still uses. The 7-year apprentice gauntlet. Year 1 to 2. Pure grunt work with no training, unpaid internships. Year 3 to 4. Mild responsibility with constant criticism, entry-level micromanagement. Year 5 to 6. Real skills development but under strict surveillance, mid-level surveillance culture. Year 7. Final, masterpiece project that masters could reject for any reason, subjective performance reviews. But here's the psychological warfare part. Apprentices had to live with their masters. Complete control over their personal lives, social connections, even romantic relationships. I found a 1402 guild contract that literally states, apprentice may not marry, drink alcohol, or associate with non-guild members without master's permission. Modern equivalent. Tech companies that demand your entire life. The work-life integration. That means you're never really off duty. The company retreats, the team-building exercises, the expectation that your coworkers are your social circle. Here's where guilds pioneered the greatest scam in professional history. Artificial credential requirements. Case study. The London Goldsmiths Guild, 1327. Master Robert Le Goldsmith had a problem. Too many talented craftsmen were setting up independent shops and undercutting guild prices. His solution: create a certification requirement. Robert's genius scam. 1. Invented complex safety standards that only guild members could teach. 2. Required expensive testing fees to get certified. 3. Made certification expire annually, subscription licensing. 4. Lobbied the king to make guild certification legally required. 5. Controlled the testing process to fail anyone who threatened guild monopoly. Within 5 years, independent goldsmiths were either bankrupt or forced to join the guild under terrible terms. Sound familiar? It's every professional licensing scam today. Lawyers, doctors, even hairstylists. Forced to pay thousands for credentials that often have nothing to do with actual competence. The American Bar Association is literally just the medieval lawyers' guild with better marketing. Guild masters created the first professional networking culture. And it was just as fake and manipulative as modern conference circuits. The Guild Festival Circuit, the Feast of St. Eligius, metalworkers' annual gathering where masters shared innovative techniques, actually just showing off wealth. A blessing of tools ceremony, ritual where guild members affirmed loyalty to the system. A master's table, exclusive dining where real business decisions were made. A journeyman presentations, younger members pitched ideas to masters, medieval TED Talks. But here's the crime. These events weren't about sharing knowledge. They were about reinforcing hierarchy and coordinating price fixing. I found guild records from 1356 where masters literally wrote, "Ensure younger members feel included, while preventing them from gaining real influence or knowledge of our pricing agreements." That's every tech conference today. Lots of inspirational talks about changing the world, while the real decisions happen in private dinners you're not invited to. 1388. England. The Wool Guild masters pulled off one of history's greatest market manipulation schemes. And it's identical to how tech companies coordinate to suppress wages and manipulate markets today. The wool cartel's strategy. A price coordination. All major wool merchants agreed on artificial pricing. A supply manipulation. Created fake shortages by withholding inventory. Competition elimination. Undercut independent sellers until they went bankrupt. The political bribery. Paid government officials to pass pro-guild legislation. Information warfare. Spread rumors about competitors' product quality. The result? Wool prices tripled while quality decreased. Sheep farmers got screwed. Customers got screwed. Only guild masters got rich. Modern equivalent. How major tech companies coordinate to keep engineer salaries artificially low. or how streaming services all raise prices simultaneously. This story is insane. Brother Samuel de Montpellier, 1401 to 1459, was a Dominican monk who ran the world's first insider trading network. Samuel's operation, information access. As a monk, he heard confessions from merchants, nobles, and government officials. A network coordination, shared sensitive information with guild-connected relatives. A market manipulation, used advanced knowledge of political decisions to corner markets. Religious cover, claimed his profits were divinely guided investments. Corruption web, had priests in multiple cities feeding him intelligence. Samuel got rich predicting which cities would be attacked, which crops would fail, which trade routes would be disrupted. All from confession booth intelligence. When investigators finally caught him in 1454, Samuel's defense was pure tech bro. I was just optimizing resource allocation based on available data. The church's punishment? They transferred him to a different monastery and let him keep the money. Medieval too big to fail. Guilds created the original gig economy to maximize profit while minimizing responsibility. And it's exactly as exploitative as DoorDash and Uber. Journeyman status equals modern contract work. To no job security. Could be dismissed without cause. No benefits, responsible for own housing, food, tools. The artificial competition. Multiple journeymen competing for same master's approval. A skills exploitation, required to use advanced abilities for basic pay. And no advancement guarantee, years of work with no promise of promotion. I found a 1443 complaint letter from journeyman carpenter John de Ashford. Master William keeps promising I'll become a guild member if I work harder. But he said this for 6 years while giving membership to his nephew who can barely hold a hammer. Replace guild membership with full-time position. And you've described every gig worker's nightmare today. Guild masters pioneered every toxic management practice that makes modern workplaces unbearable. Medieval performance management. Constant criticism. Nothing apprentices did was ever good enough. A moving goalposts. Requirements changed arbitrarily to maintain dependency. The emotional manipulation. Masters acted disappointed rather than angry, more psychologically damaging. Comparison torture. Constantly compared apprentices to each other. A gaslighting. Made apprentices question their own perceptions and abilities. Case study. Master Thomas the Weaver, Norwich, 1389, kept a detailed journal of his management philosophy. Some choice quotes. An apprentice who feels secure becomes lazy. I ensure mine never know where they stand. Praise must be rare and conditional. Otherwise they'll think they deserve it. When correcting mistakes, always question their character, not just their technique. This prevents future errors. Thomas's apprentices had the highest suicide rate in Norwich. But his textiles were profitable, so the guild considered him a management genius. Modern corporate culture learned from Thomas. Every toxic boss who makes you doubt yourself is using 14th century psychological warfare tactics. 1419, Florence. The Silk Guild versus the Wool Guild. What started as economic competition became actual warfare. And it created the template for every modern corporate hostile takeover. The Silk Guild strategy. Industrial espionage. Stole wool production techniques. Talent poaching. Offered better terms to wool workers. A supply chain sabotage. bought exclusive access to raw materials. Political lobbying, bribed city officials to favor silk over wool. Reputation warfare, spread stories about wool quality problems. And that, my cosmic crime investigators, is how humanity spent 4,000 years falling for the same scam over and over again. If this blew your mind, absolutely demolish that like button and let me know in the comments. What's the weirdest prediction you've ever believed? Astrology, algorithm, or otherwise? Subscribe for more dark history deep dives that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about human civilization. Ring that notification bell because next week, we're investigating how ancient love potions evolved into dating app algorithms. And trust me, that story is even more twisted than this one. Until then, remember, whether you're reading horoscopes or scrolling through feeds, the most important prediction you can make is to think for yourself. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next investigation.